I don't usually believe in conspiracy theories. I don't, and it just doesn't seem to make sense to me. Any conspiracy will usually be exposed in the end. It's just the way it is. And there's too many incompetent people in government to really believe that there's a conspiracy theory. Sometimes things just happen, right? Sometimes the world's a messy place. We don't understand all of it, and so conspiracy theories are attempt to make sense of the senseless. All right, now, but I do believe in demons. I do. I do believe in supernatural and evil forces, and supernatural good forces too. By supernatural, I mean things that are above nature, above the natural world. And I believe that basically these things exist and actually affect our world. And the world becomes the things make more sense when you just allow yourself to think this way. And it's not, it doesn't mean you have to give up science or anything. It just means that you acknowledge some things aren't scientific. Okay? Now, there has been, I've been listening to the Kumite. For those of you who don't know, the Kumite is like this internet talk show, basically. And they have been talking to and about this pedophile called Ross. I don't need to go into details on him. He's a terrible human being. He is severely mentally retarded, apparently, or at least he pretends to be. But he's also malicious, and clearly he's sexually attracted to children, and he doesn't want to do anything about it, and he seems to be choosing to go down this dark path. The choice is what I want to talk about, because I think this is sort of a stream of consciousness video. I'm still processing this, but I get the strong sense that, here's the thing. We say that certain people are monsters, like pedophiles and other, we have a strong outrage at these people, and rightly so, and so do I. That's why I'm trying to choose my words carefully, But I don't want to make the mistake of not understanding a crucial thing about pedophiles and other monsters. They choose this. They choose this. Okay? I know you can't. We don't know where the sexual attraction to children comes from, but I'd be really surprised if it didn't involve some choice. However, there's more than choice there, isn't there? I mean, because, you feel like this dark influence on people like Ross, driving them insane, driving them to do worse and worse things, and driving them down this dark path, like whipping them down this dark path, and them, like they approve of it, but once they make this choice, it seems like they almost have no choice, and they're just being sucked down, It's like, that's what I mean when I feel like demons are real, I feel like there is a malicious force out there. And I've said this in other videos, okay? We don't know where free will comes from. We don't know where morality comes from. We don't know where self-consciousness comes from. There's no scientific explanation for these things, whether you like it or not. There's theories on where these things come from, but they're not explanations, and I don't think they even begin to explain. And if you can acknowledge that, why not acknowledge morality, free will, self-consciousness, if there's no scientific explanation for these things, okay? And there isn't, at least not yet. If they're supernatural in themselves, these things that we all have, is it really that big of a jump to think that there's things out there that we don't know about, that aren't scientific, aren't in our dimension at all, but have morality, free will, and self-consciousness? Why not? Why not acknowledge that possibility? Because it makes it a heck of a lot easier to understand certain things, like this guy Ross. I feel it's like, I know that this isn't I don't have proof that demons are real. I just have evidence and hunches, things that we could see, like just, if you had listened to the Ross thing, you'll get the strong sense this person is beyond the reach of reason, and is beyond the reach of appeals to our decency, of our morality. And he's chosen that path. He's chosen to do this, and he's deliberately like turned away, and now he's down a path that, and we're watching him, and we can't even understand what he's doing, but he's like being driven off that path, and any appeal to get him back is just like, no, 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 like don't get help. I'm not gonna get help. I'm gonna it's kind of like creepy. But if you think that, hey, these are demons driving him away, it makes a lot more sense. There's lots of evidence of demons in history. Okay, forget exorcisms; they're real. They actually do happen. Okay, if you ever heard the story of Rasputin, I mean, it's funny how these atheists never mention Rasputin and how he died, because you should look it up, because what they poison. Like, this is a guy who basically started the Russian Revolution, which caused millions of people to die or be enslaved, and caused institutional atheism to happen on a large global scale throughout the world. And he was key to getting this started, because he undermined the ordinary people's faith in the government, the Tsar. And there is no explanation for him except that he was demon possessed. He seemed to have this supernatural power over the Tsar's son, who had hemophilia. He said he had the power to heal him. But what's more creepy than that is they assassinated him, and they fed him cakes filled with cyanide. And he still stayed alive. He felt no effect. They shot him. They beat him up with a club. They wrapped his body in ropes and threw it into the river. And when they found his body the next day, there was water in his lungs, which means that he was still breathing, and he had seemed to have gotten some of the ropes out. This is another example of a guy who has given his soul to demons, given his soul up to those things, and it got to the point where they could keep him alive physically. It's a freaking creepy story, and it's all historical fact, documented. I mean, look it up, okay, guys? Look up Rasputin, Death of Rasputin. It's kind of famous. So don't tell me that there's no evidence that demons are real. Just don't tell me that. You might be scared to think about that. Doesn't mean that the evidence isn't there. Not proof. You could dream up some rational explanation, although it's for Rasputin. The only thing you can dream up is that they were just lying, because there's no other way. I mean, you don't drink cyanide and stay alive. That stuff just kills you, okay? Stops your heart. You're dead. This guy stayed alive. Not only did he stay alive, but he showed this weird, crazy supernatural power. Mexico. I want to talk about Mexico. So I feel that not only are demons real and they have sort of domain or influence on individuals, I think they have influence on actual countries. Now, I'm not saying anything crazy like Mexico is demon possessed. No, but it's kind of strange. This is just a hint this is a theory I have. Mexico back before the conquistadors and all that stuff was ruled by the Aztecs. The Aztecs were really obviously demon worshippers, in my opinion, because they had their religion was all based around was it the feathered serpent, right? No, I'm not an expert. It's been a while since I read about this stuff, but if I remember right, they had snake skin drums. They beat on the drums, the snake skins, and these people had no contact with Christianity. So don't tell me it's it's really bizarre that they chose snakes as their main motif of their religion, which involved human sacrifice. But the conquistadors came, they ended that stuff, and basically, if you look at the Aztecs and you really look into them, it's hard to not see these people are just committed to being as evil as possible. I mean, they had so many human sacrifices. There's piles and piles of skulls that they have dug up. They killed so many people. They would have wars just to get prisoners of war so they could sacrifice. And they bent guys over, ripped out their heart with an obsidian knife, and threw their bodies to the wild dogs. And they would do this, hundreds of them a day. It's unreal, okay? And then later on, basically, if you look at that all ended hundreds of years ago. And now today they have these these drug cartels, these gangs, and you hear these horrible stories about, like, and not stories, you see evidence they've done this, like, of just, like, taking people's faces off, ripping out their tongues, all these this extremely violent stories. It's hard not to look at this and say, something's wrong. Mexico's temptation is, like, to be extremely demonically violent, ripping bodies apart. It seems to be a motif that happens over and over again. Like, why not theorize that whatever demon is in charge of Mexico, whatever demonic, boss is in charge of Mexico, has a penchant for the violent, and other countries have different, like, ways that they become evil. Look at this history of England and Ireland. I mean, England is usually they're. I mean, I'm not saying, like, they're usually kind of, very English, but when it comes to Ireland, you look how England treated Ireland for centuries. It seemed like they repeatedly were very, very extremely violent to them. Like, it was a very, think of how differently England treated Ireland, and this is recently, as opposed to England treating, someplace like India, or, and one of their many colonies. They treated Ireland much worse than any of those people. Like, it's almost like when they came to Ireland, the English went crazy, went insanely angry and mad, like Cromwell and all that stuff, and the repeated, inhumanities they visited upon Ireland, which, of course, violence begets violence. And, I'm not saying the IRA is great, or yay the IRA, or anything like that. I'm just saying that, like, you see this turn to the twist to the really demonic when it comes to England's treatment of Ireland, or America with slavery. I mean, or like with just, like, race relations. I know that this is going into deep waters here, and I'm sure if anyone from the alt-right hears this, they're going to probably give me lots of lectures about, oh, race is real, races are different. Yeah, fine, but it seems like that when the Confederacy started a war to keep slaves, that was kind of irrational, and the Civil War was about slaves. It was about states' rights to own slaves, and, like, they committed themselves to a war to keep chattel slavery. And, like, in an age of machinery and stuff like that, why? I'm not saying that everyone who fought in the Civil War was fighting for slavery per se, but the war was started for slavery, and it seems like we had something wrong with our country ever since then. Like, like, we just can't get this thing right, and this temptation to hate each other repeatedly comes back over and over again. Look at Turkey. Just to change the subject totally, Turkey seems to be a country that keeps on doing horrible things over and over again, and not like extremely violent horrible things like Mexico, but like really evil psychological things. Like, this is the story of the Janissaries, for example. Turkey conquered Christian lands. They would kidnap the oldest son of a Christian family. They would brainwash him into becoming, like, a secular a soldier for Allah, and they would send these soldiers back to conquer and enslave their own homeland. It's so sick. You know what I mean? It's so crazy sick. But they do this all the time. Like, and the Janissaries, it was awful. And then you see that happening, hundreds of years ago. And then, like, this sadistic, evil thing, And then fast forward, like, 500 years later, you have the Armenian genocide, the first genocide, which is full of the sadistic stories of, like, the Turks doing things like, crucifying people, and like, I think I remember the stories of them shooting babies, letting a baby play with a gun and then laughing at it and then shooting him. There's pictures of the Turks dangling pieces of bread in front of starving people, and laughing about it. Like, this is nasty, sadistic pleasure in other people's pain. And you see the same sin or imperfection, or whatever you want to call it, coming back and back and back to the same country, Turkey in this case. Do you see what I'm saying? You can see a pattern of behavior in countries. So I think that demons not only influence individuals, they influence countries as a whole. And you see the same institutional sins coming back and back. Now, you might at this point think, you might see some similarities to what I'm saying, to what SJW would say, about like institutionalized racism and the patriarchy. Like, there's just same things. I think that those things don't exist in human life, but they might exist in the spiritual life. They might exist in a dimension above the ones that we can detect with our scientific instruments. And if they do, that is that makes sense more. And I think almost one more point, that all these, a lot of times the lunacies that we see in the left and on the right are because we have lost our grasp of the spiritual dimensions. The SJW stuff, the moral outrage over perceived institutional sins. Well, if there is an actual common, if there's an institution that does these sins, I think it's not a secular institution at all. It's a spiritual institution. That's what I think. I think it's spiritual doesn't mean good in this case. Spiritual means bad in this case. You know, there are bad spirits as well as good spirits. I don't see why we would think any different. Why would we? You know, if they're, and on the right, you know, the conspiracy theories that, oh, this is really happening because of this and this and this. Oh, we're being, right now, the whole thing with Syria, it looks like we're being driven to war over something stupid. And, you know, like there's, who's really behind this, you know, parentheses. I don't believe in conspiracy theories, but I do believe that they are an attempt to connect the dots for a culture and a people that have forgotten about the spiritual. A spiritual people that are aware of this higher reality, spiritual reality, would be able to connect those dots without resorting to crazy conspiracy theories. Okay? But if you're a secularist, if you're someone who's totally blind to this aspect of life, well, you're going to be grasping for a way of connecting the dots. You're going to be grasping for a way of connecting these dots because, honestly, you have an urge to do that, and there's enough evidence that you can sort of construct this patchwork theory that doesn't really work. Let go of that theory and acknowledge the spiritual. All right? You don't need to become religious to do that, but I would strongly advise it at that point, you know, because, you know, religious people know about this stuff, and we have ways of fighting it if we need to. If you like this video, please subscribe to my channel.